All right, folks, we're here for a Public Works meeting. It's 12:30, Tuesday, September 26, 2023. We'll start this meeting with a roll call and determination of quorum.
Here.
Pettigrew.
Here.
Lehman.
Here.
Ham.
Here.
Roseland. Everyone is present and we have a quorum.
Thank you. Next up is the adoption of the agenda. Motion by Ham, second by Roseland. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And motion approved. General public comment. I don't see any speaker request forms. We're going to open and close that item. Then we're going to go on to consent items 1 through 15. Oh. Mr. Eisinger is here for his variance, I'd imagine. Ma'am, were you here to speak on anything? I'm here to speak. Then I'll reopen general public comment. You have 3 minutes if you'd like to take some time at the podium.
My name is Kathy Beck. I live at 2511 Merlot Drive. On September 20th, I received a water bill that was $803. I'm a single person. I live alone. I can't imagine. I had turned my water sprinklers off on September 1, so that wasn't even included. I came down here. The lady at the desk told me I needed to call a plumber to check out my water issue. So I asked her if there's any way the city had someone that they could send out. She said no. So I went home, called a plumber. He came, did everything, checked my lines, checked my house. There was nothing. He said there's nothing wrong. It must be a meter issue. But the meter seemed to be working. So I called back down here again. That lady, whoever I talked to, she was a step above the one that I talked to the previous day. She told me that somebody must have pulled up to the side of my house and stole $800 worth of water. Now that sounded about as stupid to me as it could get. If somebody was going to steal $800 of water from my little faucet, they'd be parked there for days. And I have a fire hydrant right at the corner. I know the fire department wouldn't have done it. I mean, they were grasping at straws for everything. So then I was getting a little irate, and she said, well, we'll send the city guy out. And I said, the city guy? I thought you didn't have a city guy that could do that. That's why I had to call a plumber and pay another $100 for a plumber. She says, well, ma'am, that's all I can say. And I said, well, what happens if I don't pay? And she says, well, turn off your water. So then the guy that came out, they sent someone out. He came out and he said to talk to Connie, whoever that is. I called Connie. Connie, I had to leave a message 3 times before I got a return call. Finally got a return call. She told me to write a letter. And I said, I'm not writing a letter. I need to talk in person to someone. So that's what I'm here today. Do you guys believe that we could possibly have an $800 water bill when nothing's wrong with your system? So I guess I'm asking, is there anything that you people can do to fix this situation?
Ms. Beck, I believe there is an appeal to the council process, and that's where the letter comes into play, Mr. Tech.
I guess I'm going to say anything's appealable to the city council. We don't have legal representation here today, but a little more background on Kathy's issue. Certainly the meter was tested, the meter tested fine. The water went through the meter, that's all we know. So certainly if she wants to write a letter to the city council, that's under your purview to take action on it.
So you gentlemen can't help me? Is that what you're saying?
We aren't the full city council, man. We can't
Well, I
make a
know
decision
that.
today.
I know that, but I just wondered if there's, she sent me here, so that's why I'm here.
If you'd like to appeal to the city council meeting on Monday night, Mr. Roberts, what's that process? As our elder.
Really, there is no process to that. I mean, she can come to the city council and speak on non-consent items Monday night. And if we want to put it on the council agenda, we can. I've seen many of these over the years. Most of them, something has happened, you know, like a broken water line under out, you know, whatever. If your plumber says that there was nothing broken, you know, I know that, just an example, couple of months ago, we had a $400 and some water bill in a rental property, and we came to find out it was a toilet that was just running that nobody had told us about. So there's a lot of times where you can use a lot of water and not really realize it. But typically, I mean, that's huge. That's absolutely huge.
Well, both the plumber and the man that came out from the city said exactly the same thing. Now, I demanded a new meter put on, and he did do that.
Mhm. Yeah, and you know what? And there's nothing, I mean, we don't know. Your water meter could have malfunctioned, but we have no way of knowing that as far as I know. Is there a way to test them, Dale?
Yes, in fact, the water meter that was in her house was tested. The way water meters are manufactured, it is physically impossible for them to overread. They underread when they start failing. There is no way that it can read in excess of what actually goes through the meter. If you do the research, and there's physically no way of that happening.
Well, that's interesting to know. I never knew that. So I think that your only option is to come in front of the city council Monday night under non-consent item, or I mean, under
Probably general public
general
comment
public
period.
comment.
And the council
And
can make the motion to add it to the agenda to discuss.
if that's,
Do I
what the
get it
council wants
added to the agenda before Monday night?
you can't get it added to the agenda
Okay.
before, I don't think. We probably,
So I just
Could,
come here
but-
like I did today and raise my hand and come up here?
There's forms on the table right to your left. And you'd fill one of those out Monday night and just turn it in to whoever's sitting at the dais, and they'll get it to the mayor.
Okay.
that would be the easiest option.
And then bring whatever supporting documentation and evidence, or send it to your council person to distribute to us. And you're either in Ward 1 or Ward 2.
One, can any of you tell me if you believe that somebody would have pulled up beside my house and stole the water?
I absolutely doubt that happened, but, you know, I've seen some pretty weird things happen in life, so you never know.
Well, I'm not the smartest person in the world, but wouldn't it take a day or more to fill up a truck with $800 worth of water with a garden hose?
Ms. Beck, Mr. Ham wants to weigh in as well.
I mostly have a question for you. Has the meter shown that it's running fast since,
No,
like this
when
month?
there's no water on, the meter doesn't go. If
And-
there's
and the
water
meter-
on, the meter goes.
everything's working right this month? So it's a complete aberration, never had anything like this before?
Never.
Okay. So the metrics, I haven't done the math on this, but I think you're probably right. It would probably take more than a day, probably several days to get that much water out of your one garden hose. So I'm inclined to, I believe you. So we're just gonna figure out what these gentlemen are saying is the best route to go is probably just to show up and general comment, and we can discuss it as a council. Unfortunately, we don't have a quorum here, and so we can't make that decision right now. So
Okay,
that's what they're saying. We're not trying to put you off. Does that make sense?
that makes sense.
Okay. I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Ham. Mr. Pettigrew, you had some comments or a question from Ms. Beck?
I just have one question. Do you have a sprinkler system, underground sprinkler system?
Yes, but they checked that, both of the city and the plumber checked that, and they said if that would have been a leak under there, the meter would have been running, because it would be flowing water. And that makes sense to me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pettigrew. Thank you, Ms. Beck. We'll see you Monday at 6:30 is when the city council meeting is, and
Okay.
it's in this room.
Thank you so much.
We're going to go ahead and close general public comment and now move on to consent items 1 through 15. We'll start with the Public Works Director, Mr. Tuck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll address items 2 through 14 and stand by for any questions after that. Item number 2 is our annual bid for equipment rental rates for snow removal. As I think I've discussed with a number of the council members in the past, for downtown snow removal, we typically hire contractors to haul the snow out when we do a snow alert downtown. That's the primary function for this agenda item, as well as if we get over 6 inches of snow, typically in residential areas, we will mobilize some private contractors to help plow streets in those residential areas. Item number 3 is the request advertisement for our solid waste Cell 15 project. That's been part of our master plan as well as our permit through the state. Estimated cost on that is $6.8 million. Item number 4 is advertisement for bids for televising of critical sewer mains. This was identified as something that we need to do as part of our wastewater master plan, which was presented to you, I believe, this past spring. So this will be a contract work to televise lines primarily in the Robbinsdale area where we have areas of infiltration and inflow, and identify which sewers would be a priority for replacement or repair. Item number 5 is a final change order for the LaCrosse Street utility improvements. This project was done in conjunction with the state's interchange work up on LaCrosse Street with their diverging diamond interchange. This is for a decrease of $42,000 and some change. Item number 6 is a change order for fire station number 1. As you can see, it's a fairly significant increase of $214,000. Primarily that is for asbestos abatement for the contractors when they tied into the new building. This was one of the items, as you may remember, the project was rebid because it came in too high. So this was an item that was removed out of the initial bid, knowing that it would have to be done. I believe it's all within budget still. Is that correct, Mr. Primus? Yes, he says, okay. So anyway, this was a cost we knew would be coming, and it's on the agenda in front of you today. Item number 7 is a final change order for our annual lane line painting contract for a slight decrease. Item number 8 is an amendment, Rapid City FMG, for $3,900 for, I believe it's phase 2 of the Wildwood Drive project. The purpose for this amendment is to create 2 biddable projects. And the purpose for that is to help streamline and attract better contractors, plus make it a more manageable project size to have 2 instead of 1 large project. Item number 9 is amendment to Avid 4 Engineering. It says for Sheridan Lake Road reconstruction, Corral Drive to Catron. The primary purpose of this is the DOT has given the city the okay to install a traffic signal at the intersection of Moon Meadows and Highway 16, or Mount Rushmore Road, if you will. So actually this, the bulk of this amendment is to do the design work to get that traffic signal installed at Moon Meadows, which will be of great benefit during the construction of Sheridan Lake Road, as well as the DOT has an upcoming project to reconstruct the intersection of Catron Boulevard and Highway 16. There will be a bridge, a grade separated interchange there near Black Hills Energy at that intersection. So item number 10 is an agreement between City Rapid City, a license agreement to WAPA, or the Western Area Power Administration, for the Shepherd Hills Booster Station. The property that was set aside for the location of this booster station is also within an easement area of the Western Area Power Association. This is a common agreement that happens when working in and around their easements. It's a no-cost agreement, I believe, well, actually, don't quote me on that. There may be a nominal cost to the agreement, but not enough that it needs a separate consideration. Item number 11 is agreement with Rapid City and HDR Engineering to replace our southwest booster station. It has reached the end of its useful life. It supplies water to a significant, if not the entire southwest portion of our city. So it's time to upgrade that. This has been a known project. It's a budgeted project. It's been known in our facility plan for quite some time. It's time to move forward on that. Item number 12 is the authorize staff to purchase a desk. The reason this is in front of you today is we've reached the collective limit, I think, with purchasing items from Evergreen Office, that it's over. I'm being corrected as I sit here. Lindsay Martin actually could shed some light on that.
It's actually because it's off state contract, and anything we purchase off state contract has to come before the council.
Thank you. And then items 13 and 14 are sidewalk variances. The first one is along Nameless Cave Road. There are no sidewalks along Nameless Cave Road. It's a rural section, therefore staff's recommendation is to approve the variance of the sidewalk. And then item 14 is Wildwood Drive, vacation of, or variance to waive the requirement to install sidewalk. Once again, it's partially urbanized but partially rural. There are no sidewalks in the area. I know the city's done work in that area recently. The neighborhood has collectively stated that they do not want sidewalks in the neighborhood to keep that rural feel, I believe. So the staff's recommendation for that one is to approve as well. I'll stand by for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Tech. And item 15 is just a reappointment of some folks to the Planning Commission. Do any of my colleagues have any items they want to discuss or pull or talk about? Or I'll entertain a motion. Mr. Roberts?
Thank you. I think 13. John, do you want to talk a little bit about that, or did you? Okay. Nope. Nothing then.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Roberts. Motion by Ham. Second by Roseland. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. That's the end of public non-consent items. Then we have non-consent item overview of EPA mandated lead and copper rule and compliance with regards to the Rapid City water utility system. And go to Ms. Kristen Haase.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today's presentation, we are going to provide you an overview of the EPA mandated lead copper rule. The overall goal of this rule is to minimize the presence of lead within our drinking system, drinking water. I would like to also introduce Eric Boyda. He's going to provide this presentation. He is our water superintendent. And he will provide information on how the city intends to comply with this process and answer any of your questions. I also, with me, again, have something to pass around for you. This is an actual lead line that kind of went out of favor here for obvious reasons, so I'll pass that around so you know what we're speaking of.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'm Eric Boyd. I'm the water superintendent. And so more specifically, talking today about the EPA mandated lead service line inventory, which is a component of the lead and copper rule. And this is a requirement for all utilities that serve 25 people or more throughout the United States. So a little bit about lead. Lead's been used heavily throughout our history, mainly because of its characteristics One being it's very malleable. It can be pounded out into thin sheets without cracking. It's very ductile. It can be drawn out into a thin strand. It's very dense, as you'll see when you get the lead service line to you. It has poor conductivity and has low corrosion. And if you've ever been curious about lead on the periodic table of elements, abbreviation PB, that's its Latin name, plumum, which was the Latin word for lead. And so if you think about our current derivative of plumber and plumbine, that actually comes from that term lead, and it shows how important that lead has been historically for plumbing. However, if you were a plumber in ancient Rome, it just meant you worked with lead, so you might be a roofer that's putting out lead, you might work in aqueducts. It wasn't just for pipes. So some of the other materials besides pipes that it's been used for throughout history is for paint, ceramics, solder, gasoline additive, ammunition, cosmetics, and batteries. And batteries now accounts for about 90% of our lead use. And so because of the negative health impacts of lead, the federal government's had a multifaceted effort to reduce lead exposure. This is just kind of a simplistic version. There's more other components to this, but going through the timeline, in 1973, they started the phase down of lead in motor vehicle gasoline. In 78 was a ban of residential use of lead-based paint. 1986 was one of our first water-related lead items, which the Safe Drinking Water Act was amended to require lead-free solder, flux fittings, and pipes. In 91, there was a ban of lead shot when hunting waterfowl. In 91 was another big major drinking water rule, the original lead copper rule, which was one of the first drinking water rules that expanded our monitoring requirements to include distribution and customers. The most shocking to me was a 1995 ban in lead solder for food cans. In 96 was the final ban for all lead in motor vehicle gasoline. And then more recently, we have the 2020 lead-free rule for pipes, fittings, fixtures, and flux for drinking water. And I put lead-free in quotes because a lot of that stuff was allegedly banned in 86, but this just further reduced the amount of lead that was allowable in fittings and pipes. And then finally, 2021, the lead copper rule revision, which we're discussing today. So the lead copper rule revision was a major overhaul of the 91 lead copper rule. And most importantly for today's discussion, it includes an inventory of all service lines. And so this has been required by the EPA and the Department of Agricultural and Natural Resources here in South Dakota. So all utilities serving at least 25 people need to comply with this rule. And just so we're all on the same page of what a service line is, I've got a simplistic diagram. So on the left side of the picture underneath the street, you have the water main. That is our publicly operated water system. Once it gets tapped off of the water main, it becomes an owner-maintained infrastructure. And so it's that smaller pipe that provides water from the water main up into the house. So what we're concerned about for the EPA inventory is that stretch that's from the gooseneck or pigtail coming off of that water main basically up to the meter is where we're concerned with. So the lead service line inventory, all of the service lines in our water system need to be inventoried by October 16 of 2024. And this can be surveyed through historic records, design standards, service line cards, staff inspections, and customer inspections. And so every single line needs to be categorized into 4 different types. One being lead, such as that line that was just passed around. Galvanized requiring replacement, that's any galvanized line that may have been downstream of lead. Unknown, and then non-lead, in which we've decided to identify any non-lead material when that information is available. So here's some of the lines that we anticipate to encounter. The furthest left picture, that's a good picture of a lead pipe coming into a house. And they have this characteristic of having that kind of bulbous connection. That's a wiped joint. It's also a dull gray that can be scratched. Galvanized steel. If you were wondering why galvanized steel is included in the survey, it's because the galvanized steel produces a bunch of rust nodules in there, like on that top right photo, and those nodules can build up lead in the system. And if you have a change in the pH, or if you have a disturbance to that line, you can cause all of that rust to go into the water, and you can get a big dose of lead at one shot. There's also a copper line, which is the primary line that we'll find throughout town. Copper doesn't have that same ability to build up rust like galvanized steel does. And it's our current preferred code standard and is still installed today. So once we finish the service line inventory, we need to provide the data online based on our population. And so we've determined that the data is going to be either hosted on Rapid Maps, or we're possibly developing a special GIS dashboard that's just specific to lead. In addition to that online distribution of data, we're required to send letters each year to every property that we identify that has lead, the galvanized requiring replacement, or unknowns. And those letters need to be sent to the customers, the property owners, and the renters. Our first plan release is going to be March or April of 2024. We also have to develop a replacement plan. The replacement plan has 3 major components to it. We need to establish goals for replacing lead service lines if our system exceeds the trigger level, which is 10 parts per billion of lead. It also needs to include a prioritization strategy based on factors including known lead service lines, replacements for disadvantaged consumers, and then populations most sensitive to the effects of lead. And then we also need to convey a funding strategy that accommodates customers unable to pay to replace. So if we just look at possible costs for replacement, right now we're still doing the inventory, so we're estimating the amount of lead and galvanized requiring replacement to be around $1,000 to $1,200. So a ballpark figure would be $6,500 to $7,500 per line for replacement. So a total replacement of that amount would be anywhere from $6.5 to $9 million. And then when replacements are required because of high lead amount in water, we're obligated to replace 3% per year. So 3% figure of that is about $234,000 to $270,000. So service line replacements, based on our current codes, service lines are a responsibility of the owner to bear any of the installation, connection, and maintenance of them. It's possible that we need to consider establishing a policy that might provide funding options for lead and galvanized replacements. And there are several grants that are available for proactive replacements, including the state water revolving funds and community development block grants. So currently, Rapid City's lead mitigation strategy is our testing protocol that's under the 91 lead and copper rule is 2 parts per billion for the 90th percentile. And the easiest way to explain what 90th percentile is imagine if you had taken 10 samples and you ordered them from lowest to highest, that 9th sample from the highest, so the 9th highest sample is the 90th percentile read. So our current 90th percentile is 2 parts per billion. The new EPA rule trigger level is 10 parts per billion. And then the health level where we have to change our treatment strategies and have to replace 3% of water lines is 15. So right now we're well below the trigger and health levels. Another thing is that the city has naturally basic pH, so our pH is higher than 7, which is neutral. And we've got alkalinity that's good for corrosion control. So on that diagram on the right side, it shows a lead service line. And so based on our alkalinity, our water actually deposits a thin layer of minerals along the inside of a pipe. So you don't actually have direct connection of the lead line and the water flowing through there. We've also not allowed to repair or partially replace any lead or galvanized lines. So we're losing these 2 lines through attrition. So if a customer does have lead and wants to mitigate the impacts of lead, the biggest thing to understand is boiling water does not remove lead. It will stay in the water after it's boiled. You can reduce the amount of lead in your service line before you drink if you flush out your water outlets. In a lot of homes, that might take upwards of 5 minutes before you get water that you want to drink or eat with. You can clean out the outlet screens or aerators on a regular basis. Use only cold water for drinking or cooking. Don't use water that's been through a water heater tank. You can acquire a ANSI 61 certified point of use filter, and then you can eat a balanced nutritional meal to minimize absorption of lead. So lead actually mimics a lot of nutrients that your body needs, especially calcium, and so your body will use lead instead of calcium if it doesn't have adequate calcium. So our next steps, we're finalizing the format for the inventory data. Last week, you all proactively approved a contract with the consultant FMG to help us input our service card data into the database. So we have that historic data. We just need to update it to this modern format. We're going to develop a communication strategy with the customers impacted, and then we're reviewing grant funding for possible larger replacement projects. So with that, I'd entertain any questions.
Do my colleagues have any questions? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to acknowledge the report. Motion by Roberts. Second by Roseland. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Motion to adjourn by Roberts. Second by Ham. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And we're adjourned.